I told you that for $250, you could get a pocket-sized camera that records true 14-bit raw video internally to an SD card. And then as soon as you reach the limits of that, you can upgrade this into a full-fledged cinema housing with active cooling, incredible battery life, a plethora of mounting points, all inside this custom-designed 3D printed carbon fiber composite shell. Would you buy it? And also, what's the catch? So it all starts with this, the Canon EOS M. This right here is Canon's first ever mirrorless camera that they released back in 2012. And even up to this day, this is Canon's smallest and lightest interchangeable lens camera they've ever released. And so with this camera, you're getting an 18 megapixel APS-C size sensor, and you're also getting Canon's EFM mount, which at this point is discontinued for Canon's newer RF and RFS system. But since this is a mirrorless lens mount, you can get adapters to pretty much any DSLR lens, like a Canon EF or Nikon F mount, as well as pretty much any type of vintage lens you can easily adapt to this mount with just a simple, cheap, like $10 to $20 adapter. And like I already said, this is Canon's smallest interchangeable lens camera they've ever made, and it comes in at only 298 grams with a battery and SD card. You can easily pocket this camera, or you can put it in a fanny pack or a really small bag, or really anywhere you need to, even if you have like a tiny little pancake lens on this. But besides that, this is a 13-year-old camera at this point, so it's very basic, very simple, and even when this was released, it was already a budget camera from Canon. So it doesn't have a whole lot of different buttons and dials for adjustability. It also doesn't have a flip screen or anything like that, although it is a 3-inch touchscreen, so you can go through the menus and change your settings and things like that with a touchscreen, which is honestly pretty great for this age of a camera, and also amazing for the rehousing, which we'll get into that in just a minute. But the real magic starts with this camera when you install a free custom open source firmware called Magic Lantern. So Magic Lantern is essentially a free open source firmware that you can load from an SD card onto many of Canon's older cameras. Now it is specifically only for Canon cameras and a select few models, like of course the Canon EOS M. It doesn't overwrite the firmware on this camera or like permanently change anything about the camera. And the whole Magic Lantern firmware just lives on the SD card. So as soon as you remove that and put a fresh one in, there will be absolutely nothing actually affected in the camera itself. So if you ever decide to sell your camera or just stop using Magic Lantern, it's super easy just to remove it from the SD card or just swap in a new SD card or something like that. And so installing this firmware on your camera will essentially allow you to unlock a ton of abilities that you never ever would have been able to do with just the standard camera itself, like advanced monitoring and audio features like zebras, waveforms, false color, as well as things like 14-bit raw video, higher bit rates, focus peaking, HDR, dual ISO recording, and essentially just a plethora of cinema level features being added to an entry-level Canon camera. Now here's the thing, since you're technically doing something that this camera was never ever intended to do, I do want to say the disclaimer that while I've never seen anybody actually brick or destroy their camera doing this, there still is technically a chance that that could happen since you're really doing something that this camera was never ever intended to do. And now if you want to see everything that Magic Lantern will unlock and allow you to be able to do, I'm going to link the website down in the description so you can do some more research and learn more about it if you want to. And also if you want to learn anything about Magic Lantern or the Canon EOS M or even the Revo housing that I'm going to talk about, the absolute most valuable resource is going to be the Magic Lantern Facebook group, which I'll link down in the description. You can find anything you need just by searching through all the new and old posts through that Facebook group. There's discussions on there about pretty much any problem you may run into, as well as just any basic questions you might have about it. But now I want to talk about a really cool project from some of the community members of Magic Lantern and the EOS M, and that is the Filmatura Revo cinema housing. So the Revo adds a ton of functionality for rigging and quality of life improvements, but keep in mind that the video quality you're getting out of this is identical to just the standard EOS M. This isn't changing anything about the fundamentals of the camera or the sensor or the video output itself, but what you are getting with the Revo is of course a larger, much more ergonomic and just a lot more riggable form factor. So there's 1/4-20 threads all around this thing for mounting anything from monitors, top handles, side handles, magic arms, and really anything else you want to on this versus the standard EOS EOS M really doesn't have any sort of mounting points. Of course, unless you add a cage onto this. Also, one of the most useful features of this is there's an active cooling fan inside of this, which is gonna fix a huge issue of Magic Lantern, which is overheating. Recording 14-bit raw video at really high bit rates is gonna overheat the camera a lot faster than it normally would. And that's generally one of people's biggest concerns with Magic Lantern is how quickly it overheats the camera. But I am happy to say with my Revo, I've never had overheating issues, even in upper 80-degree heat and direct sunlight. The active cooling fan inside the Revo completely solved the overheating issue for me. So far this thing's doing great in the heat. The temperature's barely even really gone up much. 34 degrees Celsius is what we're showing. Also on the back here, you're getting a Sony NPF battery mount, which is going to give this incredible battery life, especially compared to the little LPE12 batteries that come in the standard EOS M. And then also on the back here, you're getting a full-size HDMI output versus just the mini HDMI on the regular EOS M. And then you're also getting USB-C input for charging the NPF battery on this, which is neat. You're getting a 12-volt output to power a monitor or, you know, an electronic follow focus or something like that. And then of course you're getting the 3.5mm mic input that already comes on this camera, but it's just relocated to the back on the Revo. And besides that, you get the screen relocated to the top here versus on the back of the regular camera. And then of course these directional buttons and keypad is going to be relocated to the side of the Revo over here. And it pretty much turns the EOS M into like a red Komodo form factor style camera, which is amazing. It's so much more useful for handheld work, especially adding a top handle on and adding these rhino grips on the side, which Filmatura also sells these as well. All the modularity and extra accessories and things you can get for it is really another awesome selling point of this, and being able to build it out into the perfect rig for what you need. Filmatura even sells modular power plates for the back of the Revo and even more custom accessories built specifically for the Revo. They have custom cages and accessories for just the standard EOS M as well, if you just want to record Magic Lantern with that. Alright, now you're probably wondering, how do you actually transform the EOS M into the Revo? So it is a bit of a DIY project. It's something that when you buy the Revo, you get this shell, you get all the parts for it, and they even provide you most of the tools for the build process. But then what you're gonna have to do is essentially pull the EOS M apart just a little bit. You have to take the screen off, you know, these buttons on the back to relocate on the side. And then you're essentially gonna put all those components in the Revo, reconnect the ribbon cables, and then it's pretty much as simple as that. You have yourself a rehoused EOS M. Now that might sound pretty complicated right off the bat, but I promise it is a lot easier than it seems, and there's no real technical skills or soldering skills or anything like that required. You pretty much take some screws out, remove some ribbon cables, and just have to be a little bit patient and have some steady hands. So even when you're building this Revo, you're not doing any sort of irreversible damage that you can't pull this apart and turn it right back into your standard EOS M. And Filmatura also has a step-by-step guide that's really useful for building this. I really think if you're dedicated enough, this is something that absolutely anybody can do. This is going to be a somewhat limited run, so I'll have more information linked down in the description. It will be pretty limited, and it's going to be kind of released in batches. But again, I'm going to link the Filmatura website down in the description if you want to learn more about the availability of this. And so I kind of mentioned some of the video capabilities of this, but there's essentially an unlimited amount of adjustability you can do with bitrate, the resolution, the frame rate, I mean really anything else you can imagine. But a couple of my go-to video modes on this are, first of all, 4.2K, 24 frames per second, 14-bit RAW, 16:9. So 4.2K is the sharpest mode that I've seen out of this camera from at least the testing that I've done, but that isn't really my go-to mode. My actual go-to mode that I use most of the time with this camera is 1736 by 976, 46.8 frames per second, 14-bit RAW. So I can essentially slow this down to about 50 or 52% to get really smooth slow motion video, which is great for B-roll and things like that. It'll also look a lot better handheld because this camera has pretty bad rolling shutter, which I'll get into in just a minute. But yeah, this is definitely my go-to mode, and that's in 16:9. But if you take the same mode and change it to a slightly wider aspect ratio, like 235:1 or 239:1, you can actually bump this all the way up to almost 60 frames per second to get even slower motion if you do want to go for that high frame rate look, which in my opinion looks really good. I think it's the best looking mode just because it's a lot smoother. It's a less choppy of a video with slightly better rolling shutter performance. Now there's so many other modes that you can choose from and mess around with Magic Lantern. And in all my other videos I've talked about this camera, I've pretty much used all sorts of different modes. Now I quickly want to throw up this ISO test just so you can see how this camera performs in low light and high ISO scenarios. And so this is in the 4.2K recording mode and of course 14-bit RAW. I typically find that up until 400 ISO you're getting a pretty good image, but anything above that it starts to fall apart pretty quick. And the noise that does show up is pretty colorful and not really the best looking, so just keep that in mind when you're recording with this. But I do find that the 4.2K mode does pretty well with this since it's a higher resolution that kind of compresses the noise a little bit more. Now I did mention that the high frame rate 1736 mode is pretty much my go-to mode, but keep in mind there are a ton of different options to choose from, including higher resolution modes that are going to be really great at different things. And really every mode in this camera is good at a slightly different thing for slightly different types of recordings. But since I usually shoot handheld and kind of run and gun scenarios, the high frame rate mode is pretty much perfect for me, which is why I use it a majority of the time. But just keep in mind, there are so many more recording modes that are going to look different and do slightly different things, and are going to look a little bit sharper and better than this specific mode that I've been using. Alright, now for the biggest and most important question about Magic Lantern. What's the catch? So I'm having weird recording errors with this. I'll record for a few seconds and then these will pop up right here. The biggest catch with Magic Lantern, it'll sometimes just run into a random error and stop recording. Sometimes you don't even really know what that error is and you just turn it off, turn it back on, it'll just start working again. And so this is the biggest thing that stops people from using Magic Lantern for professional workflows. You know, obviously overheating is another big issue that the Revo itself doesn't really have, but the EOS M with Magic Lantern has pretty bad overheating issues, which will cause it to stop recording. And generally there's just gonna be quirks and there's gonna be little issues that are gonna cause you to have to do retakes every once in a while and, you know, have corrupt footage every once in a while even. And so this is the type of thing that just isn't feasible in a professional workflow. You know, if you're filming like a run and gun documentary where you have to capture the moment in the moment, you can't retake it, Magic Lantern in general just won't be feasible for that. However, what this is great for is number one, for learning. You can learn about all the different aspects of filmmaking, how everything affects your footage, white balance, ISO, shutter speeds, as well as raw video, about color correction, color grading, codecs and bit rates and things like that. If you're filming narrative work or videos like what I'm doing right here where you can retake if something goes wrong, those are the scenarios where shooting with Magic Lantern are really gonna shine and where you can get some incredible footage at pretty much an unbeatable price. Alright, so another big issue of this is gonna be the rolling shutter. This has surprisingly bad rolling shutter and jello effect, especially when you're panning left or right or doing handheld video and things like that with a lot of movement. The severity of the rolling shutter and jello effect can really ruin some shots. And again, recording those higher frame rate modes that I talked about will help with this, but you just are gonna have to keep in mind that this camera has really, really bad rolling shutter. Also, this has a pretty in-depth workflow. So the files that you're getting straight onto the SD card of this are gonna be a .mlv format, which aren't really readable by any video editing software. So you have to pull these videos from your SD card onto your computer and then import those into the MLV software, where you can do a little bit of adjustments on the video and then export it as a different file format. And so you can pretty much select whatever file format works best for you and for your workflow and editing software. And so you can export it in something like Cinema DNG RAW or ProRes 422 HQ or something like that. And then from there, you import that into your editing software and then get to work editing these files like normal. So it's a pretty in-depth process from shooting your footage to actually editing it in your editing software. And lastly, kind of playing onto everything I've talked about, there's a really large learning curve with Magic Lantern. You know, it's gonna be something where you either need to spend a ton of time just messing around, learning about what modes work best for you, what modes are most stable for you, you know, what'll give you the best look, and really what's gonna work best for you for your specific use case with this. Since, like I said, Magic Lantern essentially gives you unlimited ability to dial this in to perfectly fit what you need and for your specific project and look and workflow. And so that's pretty much all I got. This is essentially the most powerful camera you can get for video recording for $250. And then for an extra $300, you can turn it into basically a mini red Komodo that's super customizable, super modular. It's a fantastic form factor for recording video. And even this gives you pretty much the best video quality and form factor and features that you can get for under $600. And so I'm gonna go ahead and link every relevant link and product and thing I talked about in this video down in the description if you wanna check it out and learn more about this. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.